Hey everyone, I'm Christine Hall, a TechCrunch reporter and proud Ohio State grad. As we've been discussing today, Columbus is gaining a reputation as a major tech hub in America, and we now shift over to the city's startup job scene, and we'll hear from three local leaders today. Erika Pryor is an executive in residence at Denison University and founder of Epic Creative and Design, a marketing, coaching, and marketing curriculum design company. She formerly was with Venture for America and Jobs Ohio. Alex Frommeyer is CEO of digitally native dental insurance company Beam Dental, a company started in 2012 that has raised over $160 million so far. Ryan Landau is founder and CEO of Purpose Jobs, a company based in the Midwest that connects talent to companies. So we have a lot of topics to discuss. Let's dig in. So Ryan, let me start with you. I wanted to talk about, what tech companies are hiring right now in Columbus.
Yeah, so I think Columbus has a super diverse, population of companies that are hiring. One, companies like Lower, like Beam, and then you also have, because of the pandemic, there's been a big shift of New York and San Francisco companies that want to tap into the Columbus ecosystem. So we see a company called Viva, which is based in San Francisco, but now hiring, in Columbus. There's a company called Guideline that works with 401k for small businesses. They're hiring in Columbus, and so I think there's been a shift of one, yes, companies in Columbus are hiring and doubling down, but now also companies are hiring in diverse locations like Columbus, where there's great access to great talent.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Yeah. Fro, I wanted to kind of jump over to you for a second. How has the pandemic changed hiring? Because now, as Ryan mentioned, there's local now, but it's now, companies all across the country are tapping into Columbus. Like how has pandemic changed hiring for you? Are you kind of doing something similar?
Yeah, I think we are. We, came to Columbus. My co-founders and I founded Beam in Kentucky. We came to Columbus because it's such a great talent market. And 75% at least of our employees are based in Ohio or in Columbus specifically today. But we've hired more remote roles than ever. And I think that's an indicator of what is true of what Ryan just said in reverse, which is finding great talent can now be done in a broad set of geographies. And in our case, when we're looking for highly specialized talent, sometimes we find that talent outside of Columbus. And so more of those roles are happening in places other than Central Ohio these days.
For sure. Yeah. And we've seen in the news lately just so many, different tech sector layoffs. I think some of my colleagues have been writing on the weekly, which is not so great, but just about all of the tech layoffs that are happening. Maybe Ryan, you could start here, and then anyone else can jump in. Has the tech sector, or has this made its way to Columbus's tech sector yet, the layoffs?
Yeah, so I think when we think about it from like a national perspective, I think there was about 7,000 people that were laid off last week alone, which is like kind of crazy. But I think, yes, I mean, are there layoffs happening in Columbus and around the country? Yes, that is happening. But from a companies and job seekers perspective, we see it as like a big opportunity for people that are actually looking to hire and build their teams, right? There's some great talent that is available that wasn't available. And then also when you think about from a bigger company perspective, like Netflix, Meta, Snapchat, and stuff like that, all of those companies, stock options are down. And so there's a big opportunity to pull people that were maybe passive job seekers or not job seekers at all, pull them off the sideline and join a startup in Columbus.
Yeah. Fro, are you kind of seeing that too, like with some of the job openings that you might have, like there's a really good, pool of talent that you've been able to kind of see, coming through in the applications?
Yeah, for sure. We see increased talent density for sure, which I think is both indicative of Beam's specific success, Columbus being more on the map than ever. So thanks to you for helping highlight a great city of Columbus today. And I think what's happening in the macro market, which is there's a flight to quality. Companies that are hiring and have really strong business models and really strong cultures are now seeing an unfair share of the available talent pool.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Erika, wanted to have you jump in.
Oh, absolutely. So I think the other thing that we've seen with some of these layoffs that have happened at some of the different companies here in Columbus is the ecosystem really rally around those individuals to really sort of help them find different opportunities. There's definitely a lot of upskilling and reskilling training programs that Columbus offers for people. So I think the ecosystem has done some good work to kind of absorb those workers and help them find new opportunities and keep them in Columbus when possible.
Are there any in particular, skills that you've seen really kind of shine through, or that, people are kind of looking to, advance themselves with?
I think definitely we've seen, a rise, of course, in anything tech, anything software development, anything data analytics. But we've also seen companies like Futurely create Talent ID, which now is sort of a data analytics academy that they're able to utilize as a pipeline. We've also seen, organizations like Perscolis and Apprenti have much more close partnerships with some of those legacy brands like Nationwide and those that are moving in like Amazon and Meta to really sort of identify where the very niche needs are, and then have that training program really customized and bring those employees in in a warm, kind of ramp so that they can really get started from the ground up and be really trained with what the company is looking for.
Yeah, since you mentioned legacy brands, Erika, love for you to start this question. What are some of the legacy brands that you've seen? What are they? How are they establishing kind of the next generation of companies, or kind of connecting the next generation of talent?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes the Columbus ecosystem really unique is we have companies like Cardinal Health that has a Fuse innovation space right within it where they're really looking at and creating their own innovations from the ground up. Worthington Industries is another legacy brand which has its own innovation space and really invests in helping employees create the next great innovations for their companies. Nationwide is another that has a very strong investment firm, and it looks to identify organizations that are up and coming in this space. So I think that's one thing that really sort of helps those larger companies sort of stay agile and have a startup mentality as they think about ways to attract talent and bring talent in the door.
Okay, great. Yeah, Ryan or Fred, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the one thing that I would say is I think, what we were just talking about, it has a really good diverse type of companies, right? There's some small to medium-sized startups, there's some larger companies, but I think culturally, right, having that startup mentality, I think is really important. But then I also think from a job seeker perspective, whether you're going to a big company or a small company, I think they all understand some fundamental things. I think they all understand this thing called work-life balance, or some people call it work-life harmony. I think a lot of the companies that we're talking to in Columbus understand the importance of being involved in your community. They understand the importance of, spending time with your family and stuff like that. And so I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is I think has accelerated trends like this. And I honestly think that Columbus is ahead of the market, and places like San Francisco and New York in that fashion are catching up. And so this idea of flexibility is not anything new. It just kind of got accelerated through the pandemic. And so what we see culturally through some of these Columbus startup and tech companies is that there's a big opportunity to work there, but they also understand you culturally.
That's a good point. Yeah, Fro, I wanted to ask you, as a tech company, what are you looking for in new employees? And kind of then, kind of the reverse based on what Ryan said, what questions are you getting in terms of how the employee is going to fit into your company in terms of that work-life balance, or, what are you offering them, in return?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think, it's worth mentioning that things have changed a lot, to Erika and Ryan's points around, coming to Columbus in 2014. Really no one, unless you happen to maybe have spent some time at Cover My Meds, had any experience working in a startup prior. Those folks were few and far between, but now because of the growth of Columbus's ecosystem and some of the innovation investments made by legacy companies based in Columbus, there are far more people that know what to expect coming into the proverbial front door of their new startup employer on day one. And that alone is incredibly valuable to an employer like Beam that otherwise is the one kind of paying that tuition on behalf of an employee, teaching them about how they should approach their work, which might be dramatically different than the employer that they came from because of the difference in culture. So what we see today is much more of a harmonious first step that's done together between employer and employee into a startup or growth company, which I think is huge progress. The pandemic has changed employees' expectations pretty dramatically. Work-life balance used to be a thing you would talk about or address, but it was very surface level, meaning that, hey, can I take time off when I need it? Now it is incredibly important for both the employer and an employee to come to terms quickly, like before you start, on exactly what a company is going to expect, how hours work in a world where we can all theoretically be plugged in at all hours of the day, and how a company approaches remote versus hybrid versus in-office work, paid time off. These questions are they're not new questions, but they're new in their frequency and how seriously employees take them in today's job market.
Yeah, and if we can just jump in there, I'll say definitely from the employers or the workers' standpoint, having just recently been on a Women in Work research study that looked at how we can bring women back into the workplace, kind of given some of that worker shortage, and looking at, what is it that companies can do. One of the things that we really saw was an imperative kind of necessity of that flexibility in schedule, because the pandemic just really sort of exposed the fissures and the challenges that women and people of color are facing in our workforce, and how, all of the things still have to tick. And so really having the ability to be flexible in the workplace, I think, is something employers are really going to have to sort of look at. And as Alex said, really kind of evaluate before you kind of even step in the door, like, what are the terms of the relationship and how can we get really clear about those, because there's definitely a good opportunity for companies to really sort of address some of those equitable wage instances and also sort of equitable work-life balance instances that I think are really going to continue to bring talent to Columbus, because the employers are really listening to what workers want and need.
Yeah, kind of along those same lines, would love to kind of touch on, and maybe Ryan, you could start, like, what is the ecosystem doing to facilitate that? Because those are, like some big challenges that are, being faced. How is the ecosystem like supporting the talent and, helping the, companies kind of retain some of that here in Columbus?
Yeah, I think from a ecosystem perspective, what makes Columbus so special is there's not just like one player that's doing it all. There's many different players in the space that are really making the community thrive. So one, I would touch on, private and public partnerships. So something like a Jobs Ohio, I think has been incredibly successful program that has been incredible for the whole entire ecosystem, not just Columbus, but for the state of Ohio. You think about someone like Drive Capital Investment, Rev One, people that were maybe from Columbus, left for a while, got experience, and then came back to Columbus to start Drive Capital and stuff like that. And so there's a mix of these private-public partnerships, investor community, legacy companies, new innovative startup and growth companies that I think make it really a special place and just gives a lot of opportunity for job seekers.
Yeah, I would definitely add on that the education industry partnerships and relationships are really vital in terms of seeing, the Ohio State University and their relationships with Rev One, and kind of streamlining the ways in which industry partners can engage with the university. And then a statewide, even University of Cincinnati has 1819 Innovation Space, where they have strong relationships with the city of Cincinnati. And then we see the same thing in Cleveland as well, with Cleveland State University and Case Western. So those education industry partnerships, I think, are really invaluable to really continuing to accelerate the ecosystem, but also prepare talent for what's next while they're still in school, while they're still training. Columbus State now, you can go 2 years free of tuition. So again, training the talent to be ready for the positions that are not yet created even.
Also worth mentioning that the founders and CEOs and other leaders of a lot of Columbus's businesses are very friendly and cooperative, and we spend a lot of time together working on making sure the ecosystem wins and the whole city wins and the whole area wins, not just the individual companies. And you wouldn't see that level of cooperation and interest in the community in larger coastal markets that you see in Columbus, I think.
Oh, good point. Good point. Well, for the remainder of the time, I wanted to kind of dive into, looking into kind of the future of Columbus. And, as we've are talking through this entire day about how it's, becoming a tech hub, or, it's on its way to being that, in America. I wanted to kind of have all of you sort of weigh in on one. What do you think the short term is going to look like for Columbus's tech ecosystem, like tech and venture capital ecosystem? And then what kind of the short term, meaning like 1 to 2 years, and then kind of your long term, forecast over like 5 to 10 years, what it's going to look like? And Erika, you're first on my left, so please start us off.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think in the long term, the tech ecosystem continues to thrive. I think we obviously see more capital coming into the ecosystem, and we see more of that capital being distributed amongst our women and people of color owned businesses. I think there's definitely an appetite, and I think there's creatives and creative technologists here that are women and people of color that are really doing exciting things also in fashion and retail. And so I think Columbus is really kind of like taking what was previously on the fringe and really kind of leaning into it. And I really see that for the next couple years. I think hopefully in the very short term, we see more equitable distribution of worker wages across our women and people of color, so that, again, as Alex said, the whole ecosystem, everyone thrives. We know that there are a lot of people who are thriving in Columbus, so we want to see everyone kind of uplifted in that process. And I think within the next 5 years, we definitely will see that kind of level out and see greater distribution of that wealth across demographic groups.
Oh, fabulous. I love that. Yeah. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I think in the next 5 years, from a Columbus perspective, I think you'll continue to see Columbus and people internally, continue to grow the ecosystem. But I think externally and external validation, where there's more investment dollars, there's more job seekers that are moving to Columbus. Because I think when a individual is looking to work for a company, they are thinking about the company, but they are also thinking about the neighborhoods, the coffee shops, the restaurants and stuff like that. And so I think you will continue to see more and more people on the job seeker side move to Columbus, not just for work, but all of the other things that surround your life in addition to work. But then also externally, more investments, like obviously the massive announcement with Intel moving in, and other companies, coming to start their second HQ in Columbus, but then also set up their main HQ in Columbus, because you see industries like robotics, healthcare, and stuff like that really moving the needle in Columbus.
Great. And Fro, how about you?
I think Columbus's, tech or startup flywheel is officially turning. So I think the short-term story is really about the story, meaning that it's now time to market and evangelize and shout from the rooftops about what's already happening in Columbus and what the inertia or momentum of the ecosystem here is likely to produce over the short term. And getting the word out, I think, is a really important, not to be forgotten component of what it takes to build an ecosystem. It's capital, it's talent, it's great ideas, great entrepreneurs, and it's great marketing, great branding, and great storytelling. On a longer term basis, one of Columbus's clear advantages is the ability to connect and plug in directly to the customer. So once you've solved for the capital necessary and great founders and entrepreneurs and a robust and dense talent ecosystem, you now have the opportunity to take what's special about Columbus, which is closeness to major Fortune 500 buyers and purchasers and vendors of products, the big foothold that Columbus has in healthcare, robotics, retail, banking, insurance, a bunch of different industries. And entrepreneurs and businesses are going to want to be located increasingly close to their customers as opposed to close to the capital, which is how you think about this in, I think, iterations past. So I think a decade from now, Columbus is really going to be taking advantage of, and companies are going to be taking advantage of the ability to stay and be physically close to the customers that they need.
Yeah, no, that's great. And thank you so much to the three of you, Erika, Ryan, and Alex, for being on this panel. This was a great conversation, and we look forward to seeing what else is going to happen in Columbus.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.